Welcome back to the 261st episode of the Daily Flip podcast. I'm your host, Alex, and today we're going to be flipping through some of the top stories, including an argument about how we need to be more flexible and willing to negotiate. I think that they are right, but I think they're wrong for the reasoning they give, or at least ignoring one of them. A interesting article talking about how Biden's stuck between the war and the campus protests and how that's probably not going to end well for him. And an article talking about the fact that FreedomWorks is shutting down after all these years of trying to bring people to the middle. And of course, we will end today with our Daily Delight, a story meant to leave you feeling positive and ready to take on the day. Now, that's enough rambling for me. Let's jump in to our daily debate. So the founders of our nation, someone brought this up to me recently, and they sent me this article that we're going to be examining first, and it talks about the founders of our nation. And I replied back that one of the things that our founders had that we don't have for one another is respect. And we'll do a little bit more of an examination of that idea as we go into the article. But do you feel as though we could reach a place where even if you don't agree, you can at least respect the other side? Or do you feel like it's gone too far one way or the other? So, with that said, let's jump into our first article. It comes from CNN, and the headline reads, James Madison and Benjamin Franklin were wrong about a lot of things, but not this. Quote, you won't know it from today's political climate, but changing your mind is a deeply American thing to do. Just look at America's founders. When James Madison was on his deathbed, his niece noticed an odd expression on his face and asked if he was okay. He replied, quote, nothing more than a change of mind, my dear. And he goes on to extrapolate on this further and further. And yes, the basic premise, the basic thesis is it is okay to change your mind. And sometimes nowadays, people get extremely hypercritical when somebody has said something in the past and then they present a different perspective. They come back and they say, well, now that I've had a little bit of time to reflect on it, go into it a little bit more, understand some more, there's not a lot of leeway, at least from the people who were previously on your side. There's always leeway, and that's why I think this premise is a little flawed. There's always leeway for people to change from the other side and then come to where you are, because there are plenty of Democrats who have left the Democratic Party. There are plenty of, Lincoln Project Republicans who have left the Republican Party. And one side or the other, whichever one they're leaving, says, oh, well, you can't do that. Whoa, what are you doing? Changing your mind? Unacceptable. And then the other people embrace them, not necessarily wholeheartedly, but at least take them in and say, oh, it's okay, bud. We'll be your shelter. So this idea that you can't change your mind, you do get some criticism from across the aisle, and they do point out, oh, hey, you were saying this a little bit ago. But if you're actually going to change your positions on a lot of things, if you're going to have a full shift, it's not as crazy to see that, no, we can change our minds every once in a while, and you will be accepted. Mainly that's because it's politically advantageous, but the point being, we really don't care that much. I think it's interesting because there is a certain level to it on which I agree where, hey, we pull up old tweets, we pull up old posts, old videos. Someone could probably go pull up an old podcast of me saying something right now from, I guess at this point, a year and a half ago. And maybe I had a different perspective on things, but that was before Ukraine had started. That was before Israel had started. That was before we saw all these extra charges come in against Trump. So there are lots of different things that have changed since then. I'm also a person who has lived in a different state now. I have had lots of experiences in my job, just in my life. I've read more. So yeah, like I sent back, because I told you at the beginning, somebody sent me this article, and I sent back to them, I was like, yeah, it's absolutely outrageous that you expect somebody to be the exact same person as when they first put out some sort of piece of information, and hold them to that old standard. So yes, that does happen every once in a while. Normally those are the naysayers, and yes, they typify. They are the tip of the iceberg of a certain segment of the population that does not necessarily accept any sort of flip-flopping, but that is a very small group in my opinion. So I want to read a little bit further into this article and kind of get at the thesis they're talking about with the founding fathers. Quote, our founding fathers had many flaws. They were elite men of the 18th century mindset, which means they were how should I say, the R word and the S word. That's not really YouTube friendly nowadays, but whatever. Quote, but they also had many virtues, including one that should not be underestimated. They were flexible thinkers. They had a epistemic humility and often changed their minds when presented with new evidence or reasoning. Nowadays, changing your mind, especially when it comes to political opinions, is seen by many as weakness. What are you, a flip-flopper? And like I said earlier, you do see some of these things. There's no doubt about that. But yes, our founding fathers were human beings. So they were able and capable of making mistakes like everybody else. And of course, you're going to be presented with new information. You're going to be willing to change your mind. I don't think, and this is not unfair, I think for a lot of people, ignorance, including on topics that I think I know a lot about. I have been presented with information in the past and been like, oh, maybe I didn't know everything on that one. Then again, there are other issues where people present me with evidence. I'm like, yeah, no, I understand. I've heard this evidence before. Here's how you refute it, X, Y, and Z. And there's other times where it's like, yeah, I don't have an answer. I'm going to have to do a little bit more. So yes, you do have to have a little bit of humility, and you can't just assume that you are always right. You do have to at least examine the other side. But it's very rare, especially on key political issues. Think of one of the greatest rivalries of the early days, Hamilton and Jefferson, or even Hamilton and Madison. They came together at the Continental Congress, and Hamilton didn't necessarily get what he wanted, but he still was there negotiating on behalf of some of the bigger states, and he wanted a stronger executive. He wanted a lot of power vested in the president, essentially, or at least the executive branch. He wanted to be able to make a bank. Then again, that was something that was probably on his mind, but it came up a little bit later as he was going in to be in Washington's cabinet. But my point being, he was there up against, Jefferson, who had a very more agrarian. He said that the agrarian part of society versus the banks and the industries in New York. He was saying, no, agrarian culture, that's where we really need to focus. That's the duty. It's more of a republic than it is a democracy. So they had very, very strong views, and they didn't just concede their views. They didn't say, hey, no, my view is wrong in order to placate somebody else. What they did was say, okay, I really strongly believe my view. Your reasoning is at least solid for saying what you're saying. So guess what? We're going to have to come to a conclusion that works for both of us. And yes, I know that, Jefferson played a lot smaller, if not a minuscule role compared to Madison, who was really pushing the case for his home state of Virginia while Jefferson was overseas, serving as the ambassador to America in France. So he wasn't as crucial, but even Madison and Hamilton, even though they were on the side of the bigger states, they still butt heads about the power of the executive, whether it should be a bicameral or a unicameral legislator. So was lots of butting heads, and they didn't just say, oh, no, I'm 100% wrong, and say it, oh, out of my humility, I accept your position. No, they said, okay, we're political actors here. We know you got power. We know you got influence, and we know that you could go back and plead your case to your people. We need to come together. So it's not simply that they were willing to admit that they were wrong and that they had humility. It was that, yes, they acknowledged that other people can have reasonable lines of thinking while not conceding their own, not saying that they're wrong, but saying, hey, guess what? Two things can be true at once. The problems with inflation right now. You could say it is too much spending. You could also say that there is some spikes in oil prices that have been colluded by OPEC. And guess what? OPEC, when they decide to raise oil prices, is going to affect everything down the chain. You can say both of those things and you can reason them very well and say, hey, this is the cause of some of the inflation, and both of those can be true. And you can make arguments for certain types of government that both could very well be true and have all the counterfactuals. But guess what? When you're coming together in order to do something, you have to cede part of your position, part of their position, not because, you're just so right. No, because we are political actors. We're thinkers who have put this a lot of time. We've put a lot of time and effort into formulating this plan. And now, as political actors, we're coming in here. We have respect for one another. We understand that they've thought this through. We've heard out their arguments. And now we need to come to a point where we can both agree, all of us, all of the states that came to that convention, we need to agree on something that will work for us moving forward. So it's the respect that they had for each other, the respect for them as advocates for their state, as people that could, like I said, go back and really shape public opinion, as formal thinkers, as people who opinions needed to be heard out in some of these conferences. And that is what is important, not just, be flexible. Because the reason I always hesitate, or I always get frustrated, or it's one of those things where you hear the terms. I hear the terms, you just need to be a little bit more flexible. And it's never, you need to be a little bit more flexible so that we can both agree. It's no, you need to be a little bit more flexible so you can come to my position. And while I'm not against flexibility in that you need to be humble and you need to be willing to take on other people's arguments, I don't disagree with that sentiment whatsoever. I feel like it's used a little disingenuously nowadays, but also, as I pointed out when I texted that person who sent me that back, and, I probably came across a little straight. I didn't have much sleep, so it's on me. I probably should have waited until I had more sleep to send the text, but I was just trying to get the message across, like, point blank. It's actually about respect. It is more about respect when we go into these negotiating situations and we start to wonder why things played out as they did. And this is what we don't have nowadays that doesn't allow people to even genuinely take somebody else's perspective into account, to even listen to it, to try to play out their argument, because you don't respect them. You have this misguided notion that you are the only one that's right. So maybe it's the egotism, the not being humble. But even if you were not humble, but you respected somebody, you would take in their perspective. So I would say respect is more important, but also we could throw in humility there. So how do we get to the place where we can respect each other once again? It's interesting because a lot of my rant today has been pretty cynical, and now I'm going to turn a little bit idealistic on you, which is try to believe that people are coming at this in good faith. And if they have a problem or misgivings, attribute it to their, I don't want to say stupidity, because I've heard this phrase thrown around in some circles that I listen to. Even actually, I take that back. Not just one side of the circle. I have multiple circles that I listen to, and both sides have basically said, oh, no, they're just too stupid to get it. And great. I'm happy that you are attributing something you disagree with to stupidity rather than genuine cynical attempts at trying to manipulate things. But maybe we could dial it back there, and maybe we just need to say, hey, I obviously could not be the person that person is. I've lived my own experiences, and I think that they are wrong, but I do believe that they are coming at this in good faith. I will at least hear them out. I will dissect their arguments, and if it still falls flat after that, we can't find a place where maybe I can say, okay, we could work with that one. We could come to a place where we could either elect someone who has similar values, or if you are a person who is actually a political actor, having enough respect for the people across from you, even if you don't agree with them, to at least get certain legislation passed that will help people in your district across the nation. That is your job. Maybe you guys should take the time to do that. But hey, maybe I am just sitting in the armchair and I don't know how hard it is. Maybe that's fair. I'm being a little bit generous, being a little bit cutesy, but at least I would be willing to hear the arguments, because I respect the people that serve our nation in the Senate, in the House enough to at least hear out their arguments. Then again, they are making a good chunk of change up there off of tax dollars and other lobbying firms, or getting the nice, lunches and dinners on the tax dime, or once again on the lobbying dime. So I do respect you, and I will listen to you. I respect you as a person, first off, but I respect you for what you're doing. But that doesn't mean I'm not going to question some things, and some of your actions aren't going to make me question whether I should respect you. So, talking about respect, this next article is coming from Axios, and it really typifies, wow, I'm using typifies a lot today. It really exemplifies how Joe Biden is not giving the Gaza war and the protest, he is not giving it the respect that it needs. And you could come at this from two angles. If you were a person on the right, you would say he is not giving these protests and the degradation, the amount of the degrading nature of them, the attack on Western values. You're not taking them seriously enough. You're not respecting the people there enough, and respecting the gravity of them. And if you were on the left, you would say you're not respecting the plight of the Palestinians enough, the fact that you're not respecting and allowing the gravity of the way that Israel is prosecuting its war in order to get their goal of ending Hamas. You're not letting that sink in, and you're not respecting that fact. So there are both sides will probably say Joe Biden's in the wrong here. And it's funny because he's trying to play the middle, kind of like he's trying to do one thing while doing the other. He's trying to please both people. And guess what? The saying is always you can't please everybody and you'll end up pleasing nobody. This is one of those cases where he might end up pleasing neither side that he's trying to placate to. So the headline reads, Biden's campus cloud, Gaza protests threatened to drown out re-election pitch. And when they say pitch, they're saying like, oh, his pitch, his sales pitch that he's giving to the American people. So I want to read the headline, the beginning paragraphs from Axios here to really highlight where they're coming from, what the issue is, and how Biden's kind of maybe trying to glide over it. Quote, for 2 weeks, President Biden kept his distance from the pro-Palestinian protests rolling through college campuses, devoting far more time to Israel-Hamas hostage negotiation than the unrest unfurling at home. By Thursday, when Biden delivered unplanned remarks defending students' rights to protest but condemning campus violence, it was clear that that strategy had become unsustainable. So now we move on to the part where Axios gives us the why it matters. And let's give him some credit here. He's trying to work on negotiations. Whether or not you like how the negotiations are working out, he is trying to work on these negotiations, get American people back. So at least give him some credit there. Like I said, a lot of people I know, a lot of people I listen to from both sides of the aisle do not like Mr. Joe Biden for various reasons, but can we at least acknowledge he's trying to get American hostages home? You may not like the way he's going about it, but he's trying to do it, so give him some respect for that. Maybe he could do it in a better way, and you don't respect the way he's doing it, but he is caring about the human lives in this situation. Once again, I say that and I want to hedge it with something because there are plenty of people who I know will still come after that. They'll say, oh, no, they're not doing it. He's not doing it the right way. If he really wanted to do it, he would do it this way. I'm like, okay, great. That's how you think that he should be acting out this policy, but you can't deny that at least he's trying to do it. Or you're telling me that no, he's not actually trying to do it because if he was trying to do it the right way, he would do it your way. And you're attributing malice. You're being cynical. You're not respecting his position. You see why this ties into the first article? You see why I put them back to back? So that's enough on this one. Let's get to the Axios' why it matters. Quote, Israel Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has vowed, with or without a hostage deal, to forge ahead with a ground invasion of Rafah, where more than 1 million Palestinians are sheltered. In the United States, universities are trying to balance protesters' speech rights while scrambling to avoid high-profile disruptions to graduation ceremonies, including at Morehouse College, where Biden is scheduled to deliver the commencement address on May 9th. So, yes, he's getting pressured from the people who he's trying to work with in Israel who are saying, hey, Mr. Biden, we greatly appreciate all you've done at this point, but we are going to go in either way. We have to end this war. We have to uproot Hamas. And Biden's sitting there like, whoa, BB, work with me here, man. You know this doesn't go over well with my constituents. And then there was the report put out there by his own comments saying, hey, we're going to restrict offensive weapons. And even then, Israel seems to be going ahead. It's not like they're doing a full pullback, but they're probably, on their toes a little bit, like, whoa, okay. So he was blustering. We haven't seen the full withdrawal of the weapons as of the time of recording this. We've seen a little bit of holding pattern when there were some shipments that went in. The reporting on it is back and forth from both sides. One side's saying that the shipments were meant to go there, the other side saying it was supposed to go to Ukraine. There's a whole bunch of back and forth there, but it is causing a little bit of hesitancy on the Israeli side of everything, and it's definitely causing some tension between him and Joe Biden. And guess what? Biden's sitting here like, oh, what do I do? Do I support the protesters? Do I call them out for using hate speech, blah, blah, blah? And oh gosh, when Joe Biden said that these people don't have the right to, they do not have the fundamental right underneath the Constitution, I'm inferring and kind of explaining because, Mr. Biden's a little slow with his words. So I'm just going to give him the credit here and say, yeah, that's what he was getting at. But they don't have the right to hate speech. And I just want to take a step back. And I'm sorry if you don't like what I'm about to say. Get over it. Hate speech is not illegal. Hate speech is not a real thing. Hate speech is just speech. And well, okay, so hey, even then, if I'm going to grant you that hate speech really is a thing, and what I mean by that is if the category of hateful speech, which is meant to target groups, whether they be race, whether they be ethnic groups, whether they be from the, let's say the gender spectrum, whatever you want, if it's a derogatory term that targets a particular marginalized group or even an oppressed group, or I guess you could even say just any group. You could just say, the white guys, and you could use hate speech against them. And you could say, no, none of that is allowed. That is the proper definition of hate speech. Sure, that exists. But the fact that there's a legal codification around it, the fact that it should be treated any different than normal speech, no, don't agree. And the reason that I hesitated earlier and said that it's not even a thing is because when you start breaking things up into categories and you start trying to differentiate them, you try to find the differences between them, you don't actually look at the similarities. And guess what? Both of those things are thoughts, no matter how good the thought is, no matter how bad the thought is, that you are expressing out loud. And what happens when we start distinguishing between certain types of thoughts and certain types of ways of expressing those thoughts that are good and bad? Because guess what? I'm sorry, whether you like it or not, our government does indeed. They go in and they legislate morality. And the slippery slope, the path towards legislating away this sort of thing is separating it from the different legal definition of free speech and normal speech and saying it is bad for X, Y, and Z reason. And then guess what? In the future, we legislate morality because no, we want to be good people. And no, it's not exactly the same thing. It's a little bit different. Then the precedent is set up that not only can the people be split on this issue, but also that what happens when, the great example is this. The hate speech term was barely ever used by anybody on the right. It was something where it was used to describe what the left was talking about or allegations of hate speech, things like this. And they kind of mockingly said it. Now that everything is happening on these campuses and certain students who are Jewish feel very threatened. They feel as though that their lives could be in danger. And these people are also pro-Israel, and the right wants to come and defend them. They're saying, oh, hey, this is very akin to hate speech. And I understand the temptation there to fall into the position that they've been using this whole time. You're trying to say, hey, you got to live by your own standards. That's hate speech, right? Then the thing is, don't cede that ground. Instead of making them the people that you go to and say, look at this standard. Look at the standard that you set up. Isn't this part of that standard? They're going to be more than happy to just include one more person in that standard who they would have wanted to protect anyway, because Jews are a marginalized group all over the world, or at least they were. You could argue there's a separation now. Some people would say that they still are in lots of different countries. Even the way that some people treat Israel, there could be an argument there that a right-wing person would definitely make. But in that case, where you're actually adopting their framework and you're saying, hey, whoa, didn't you say something about hate speech? No. Instead of you going to them and saying, hey, no, that rule that you were making, we thought it was stupid then, and we're trying to hold you to that standard now, they're going to embrace you with open arms. No, you pull them back to your side, and you say the rational people who don't think that even if they think it's hateful speech, that it shouldn't be codified any differently. We shouldn't describe it that way. We shouldn't give in to any of those temptations just to get rid of that speech that we don't like in the moment. We got to point to those other people who are using those old rules and say, hey, look at those rules that you set up. I still don't believe in them, but now they're being used against you. Maybe do you want to come back over here? You want to come back over on the side of free speech and acknowledge that everybody should be able to say anything, and if they say something nasty, you and me can just be like, hey, Jimmy, don't come over to our house anymore. Yeah, we just don't want to hang out with you. No legal issue whatsoever. You say whatever you want, bud. That doesn't mean you can say it at my house. This is a serious thing that scares me when you hear the president of the United States say it. It's been running in political circles for a while now. Should we adopt hate speech laws like Germany? We've been talking about it for some time. But then you hear the president of the United States say it. You hear people on Fox News say it. You see polls that say more people are okay with calling out hate speech and saying it's not actually acceptable. And if you want to say it's not acceptable on a social level, I accept, and let's be clear, and then based on the question there, and I'm accepting the definition of hate speech, sure, I could buy into that. I don't want people to be extremely hateful. I don't want those people around me. But if it's going to come down to codifying it in law, you're going to find me on the opposite end purely for the principle of the matter. I'm going to say that it doesn't exist, because even giving into that is something that I'm not willing to do. As you can tell, free speech absolutes. There's probably two issues that you can catch me outside on: free speech and China, Taiwan. And even then, there may be a few other ones where you can catch me outside, but those two are super important. But free speech is always going to be on top of them, because guess what? I can't be a person who has really passionate opinions online. In person, I can't be outrageous. I can't speak my mind about any of these other issues without that first one. And you could say that, hey, you can't actually speak your mind without the power to keep the government away from you and protect yourself. So the second one's pretty important. I don't disagree. It is also up there on the top of the list. But the voice, even in a society where you're not allowed to bear arms, not being able to voice dissent. So if you put a society that doesn't allow you to bear arms versus another society that doesn't allow you to bear arms, which one's worse? The one that allows you to dissent and put your opinion out there, go out and protest, make sure that the politicians know that you're going to push them out, being vocal, or the other one that says, no, you can't show any resistance. You can't speak. These certain restrictions are here for this reason. We understand that you want to be able to speak about these things, but no, it's going to hurt other person's feelings, so on and so forth. Which one's worse? Obviously the second one. The first one is obviously the better society. So I think that even if you were to remove arms, you could still express your displeasure with the government. Then again, the arms allow you to back that up a little bit more. So sorry, went into a little bit more of a conversation I've been having at my job with some people. So let's jump into our final article. Sorry, I dropped that one there. We're going to jump into our final article that comes from RealClearPolitics. And we're going to jump into our final article. I'm going to say about 15, 16, 20 words, maybe. Well, I'm cutting into it now, so I'm not going to pretend this is going to be that short. But they're doing an article about the fact that FreedomWorks, a center-ish right organization that's been trying to bring people into the middle, trying to bring people from the outskirts of the right in a little bit, and also people from the middle Democrats and even some of the more mainstream middle of the road liberals who are in the middle of the party, which makes them still pretty left, and trying to bring them all back together. It's been operating for nearly, I did a quick research because I've seen their logo before. I've seen what they do before, but that doesn't mean that I actually fully understood their breadth. They've been around for, I believe, 30 plus years at this point, and they say that, hey, there's not really a place for us anymore. And there's a few different quotes from the president, and I do want to read you one. As I take that back, the entire article is from the president, but there's 2 or 3 quotes that I really, really want to read you here, but I'm only going to read you one, and then you can go do the entire article. You can read the whole thing on your own time. Quote, "The window is open now over the next few election cycles to build a community for the politically homeless that could break the stalemate in Congress and pull power back from the executive and regulatory branches. Our country is not designed for an unaccountable elite that decide policy. An imperial presidency with governance through executive order is not a substitute for a constitutional system." And I think he's actually right. Whether or not you agree with the idea from the people on the left that Trump is a right-wing extremist, which if you do a political test on him, he's actually not that extreme on the right wing, but if you believe that mentality, if you participate in that mentality and you believe that he actually is pretty far right, and you don't like that, and then you look over at Joe Biden, who's following the Bernie Sanders, the AOC playbook, is what the critics would say from the right, even though he's been pretty middle of the road with some things that lean a little bit more left. But if you put him square down in 1998, you would say about 55% of his agenda lines up pretty evenly there, and the rest of it is really colored by the Obama era when he was vice president, which politics has changed since then. Is it necessarily moderate? A little bit, but he's being influenced by the far left and some of the identity politics stuff, some of the culture war stuff. It's definitely more to the left. So if you're somebody sitting there who's like, I don't like the perception of Joe Biden or Trump, this could be a point where we rally people back to the middle. I think they have a point here, but they're saying that their battle is over, that there's no place for them anymore, that the base is basically riled up every single time. They know that they're going to show up, and the candidates are kind of just playing for the middle now, rather than actually these people coming in and actually having to pull them back to the middle in order for the general election. So I think it's an interesting argument. Go read that article along with all the other articles. But before we're out of here, before I say the catchphrase, let's jump to our Daily Delight. It's going to be a very quick one. The article is a little bit longer, but the headline reads, "Dad creates perfect outdoor cat TV to make kitty's life better." Quote, "It makes sense that experts often recommend trees so that your cat won't get too crazy. Well, guess what happened when this gentleman put a cat tree into his window, or more accurately, a little dangly toy. This cat went absolutely crazy. He was, watching all the squirrels, still having a fun time. If you want to read any more of this article, or you want to see any of the cute photos or videos that go along with it, you can check out the link to the articles in the description below that like and subscribe button. All of them will be down there, as well as the link to the podcast on Spotify, Pocket Cast, Google Podcast, as well as Podvine, and the link to the Twitter tirade segment, the Twitter handle at your Daily Flip, where the Twitter tirade is posted every Tuesday and Thursday. A little bit more light and breezy, not necessarily reading articles, kind of just talking about books I've read recently, or just ideas that pop into my dumb head, or questions about the future, things like that. So with all that said, there's really only one more thing to say. Stay safe. Don't die.